Hello, my name is Catherine Dunn. I work and live here in Canberra in the ACT. A bit about me. I came from a small town in country New South Wales, Forbes. I grew up there with my sister and came to the big smoke of Canberra to go to university and spent five years here doing a commerce, banking and finance degree and a Bachelor of Laws, so a double degree over 5 years. For much of that time I lived on residences, which was a great experience, and then I lived in a group house afterwards. So moving from a small country town to Canberra onto residences was a bit of a challenge, and I suspect that many people can empathise with that change in lifestyle. It was quite an adjustment going from school, where I did quite well and got some really good marks, to university, where the expectation was very different. The expectation of how quickly you needed to become upskilled with things, the type of writing you do, the type of analysis, the way you need to think, and the way you need to interact with both your peers and with tutors and lecturers was very different to how we operated at school, where it was much more spoon-feed. You were very autonomous and independent. So the first 12 months I found really hard at university, and it took a little bit of time. I think one of the things that university did for me in those first few years initially was actually help me prepare for the workforce, because the jump of going from university to the workforce is equally challenging. And if you don't prepare yourself adequately, you don't think about what that jump is likely to be depending on which industry you're going into, then I think you're more likely to falter and take time to find your feet and maybe wonder if you've made the right decision. The more preparation you can do in understanding what the workforce is that you're going into, what industry it is, what it means to be a construction engineer, or what it means to be an accountant, or what it means to be a lawyer, will help you prepare in every aspect before you go in. So a unit like the one that's being taught here is actually really valuable. I'd make a couple of suggestions in preparing for the workforce. One of them is to talk to people who are already in that industry and in that profession to understand, for example in my case, what it means to be in professional services. Once I graduated from the University of Canberra, I actually went into PricewaterhouseCoopers as a graduate and spent some time here in the Canberra office. Now, PricewaterhouseCoopers is a professional services firm, and they have a range of businesses, which I'll talk about in a second. But the advantage I had going in as a graduate was, in fact, I'd worked in a law firm for 4 years before that, part-time, and sometimes it was more demanding than other times, depending on what was going on at university. But it helped me understand what a professional organisation, such as a law firm or professional services, expected. What was important in relation to dress, in relation to, and this sounds a bit silly, but how you do your hair, whether you can go to work with bright pink hair or lots of different colours, and in that environment it's not acceptable. In an environment such as perhaps a less formal environment, probably is acceptable, fine. But in a professional services or a legal environment, different approach. What you needed to do in terms of the way you wrote emails to people. And perhaps back then emails weren't quite as prevalent, but anyway, we wrote notes, right? So how we answered the phone was really important. Turning up on time to meetings or to client events, or just turning up on time to work every morning. And if you couldn't turn up, making sure someone knew why. Those sorts of sort of habits were really important, and being part of the industry and part of an environment like that throughout university actually helped me prepare come the day that I started 5 days a week in work, which was a challenge in itself. So that was one of the things that I think helped me prepare for work. Another thing, as I said, was to talk to people to understand what that particular industry means, what the expectations are on you in terms of the time commitment you make, the way you behave, what's expected in terms of your knowledge and understanding of the delivery of services, and also whether it aligns to your values and ethics, so the way you like to operate. So I started as a graduate at PwC in our what was called GRMS, which is risk management, so internal and external audit services and risk management services for both local ACT federal government clients, so ACT and federal government clients, but also for private enterprise as well. I spent 12 months here in Canberra working on internal and external audits, and then I moved down into our Melbourne practice, and I spent some time in both Melbourne and Sydney for a few years working in consulting, which is a slightly different business. The consulting business do less structured formal work that's regulatory based. In the consulting business, we advise on a whole range of different activities that clients need some assistance on, which I'll talk about shortly. Then I moved into Macquarie Bank and worked there for 5 years. Now, what you might find as students really interesting is both the banking industry and the professional services industry, Macquarie Bank and PricewaterhouseCoopers, they're both global organisations, they're both very large, they're both quite formal, they're well known, they've got good brands, reputations, all of those sorts of things. But fundamentally, the culture in those two organisations is very different. The expectation on you, turn up on time, deliver high quality services, always behave appropriately, always behave with the reputation of your organisation and yourself as an individual in mind. All of those things are the same, but the culture that you go into is quite different. So the interaction between people is quite different. The focus on what success means is quite different, and you would expect that investment banking versus professional services. But what I found most interesting about that was I probably didn't understand the difference when I started work at Macquarie. I thought I knew what working in a professional environment was, and whilst I had a baseline understanding, I didn't know that it could be so different in two different organisations. So that's something I would encourage students to understand, really research the organisation before you make a commitment and make sure it's the right organisation for you.